then you have to take care of him forever.
Ishvara didn't do anything for Ayodhya so far.
Yeah, he'll come back. Give it.
Come back.
He's in the Supreme Court.
It was so interesting. There was one in the question and answer sessions. So there was some Vedantic questions and so on. So then Swamiji was reading it. This was a very interesting. He said, Swamiji, I understand you're very close to Prime Minister Modi, period. I have a request for you. Why are we calling our country with an English name?
Yes, that's controversy going on.
And then why don't we ask him to change it to Bharat or Hindustan or something?
Hindustan is not.
Hindustan is not.
No,
it's
in
a Mughal name.
No, in Hindi, they always use Bharat.
Bharat,
In
yes.
Hindi document, they don't use
Yeah,
India,
Bharat.
only in English.
So Swamiji's reply was, listen, Modi ji has a lot of priorities.
Exactly. Name change.
This may be number 991, you know. So just trust him, we might get to it. That was really funny.
That guy is extremely good.
So anyway, we had a very good time, and yeah, the ashram is doing well, but also expenses have gone up a lot, and so they could want continued support. Anyway, good, very nice place. All right, shall we start? Okay. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Mauna Vyakhya Prakatita Parabrahma Tattvam Yuvanam Varshistante Vasat Vishiganai Avrita Brahmanishtai Acharyendram Karakalita Chinmudramananda Rupam Swatma Ramam Mudita Vadanam Dakshinamurti Vatavitapi Samipe Bhumi Bhage Nishannam Sakala Muni Jananam Jnanadatar Maharat Tribhuvana Gurumisham Dakshinamurti Devam Jananamarana Kacheda Daksha Gururyava Gurostu Maunam Vyakhyanam Shishyastu Chinna Samshaya Nidhaye Sarva Vidyanam Vishaje Bhavaro Murtaye Namaha Yom Pranavarthaya Shuddha Jnanaika Murtaye Nirmalaya Prashantaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bhuta Vibhagine Vyomavat Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha. Om Vishwam Darpana Dishyavana Nagari Tulyam Nijant Bhutam Yata Nidraya Yat Sakshat Kurute Prabodha Samaye Swatmanamevadvayam Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namahitam Shri Dakshinamurtaye Bijasyantarivānkuro Jagadidam Prāṅirvikalpam Punaha Maya Kalpita Deshakala Kalana Vaichitrya Chitrikritam Maya Viva Vijram Vayatyabimaha Yogi Vayasvechaya Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namaidam Shri Dakshinamurtaye Yasyaiva Spuranam Sadatmakam Asatkalpartakam Bhasate Sakshat Tattvamasiti Vedavachasa Yo Punara Vrittirbhavam Murtaye Nana Chidragatodharastitamaha Pavadritam Swaram Yasnam Janamiti tameva bhantam samastam jagat tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namaidam Shri Dakshinamurtaye Deham pranamapindriyanapi chalam buddhim cha shunyam viduhu Sri Balanda Jadopamasthamiti Bhranta Brusham Vadinaha Maya Shakti Vilasa Kalpita Maha Vyamoha Samharine Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namaidam Shri Dakshinamurtaye Rahu Grasta Divankarendra Sadisho Maya Samachadana Sanmatra Karanopasamharanato Yo Bhutsushuptaf Puman Pragaswapsamiti Prabodha Samaye Yapratyabhidyayate Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namaidam Shri Dakshinamurtaye Balyadishu Vichakradadishu Tatha Sarvasvavasthasvapi Vrittasvanupmanam Prakati Karoti Bhajatam Yo Mudraya Baddha Tasmishvam Pashyati Karya Karanataya Swaswami Sambandataha Shishyacharyataya Tataiva Pitru Putratyatmana Bhedataha Swapne Divaya Esha Purusho Maya Paribhramitaha Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namaidam Shri Dakshinamurtam Ityabhati Characharatmakamitam Yasyaiva Murtyashtakam Nanyat Kinchana Vidyate Vrinushatam Dakshinamurtaye Sarvatmamiti Sputi Kritam Yasmatamushmin stave Tenasya Shravanat Tadatmattvamaha Vibhuti Sahitam Syadishwaratvam Svataha Siddhyetat Punarashtada Paranatam Chashvaryam. When we started this verse last week, we started with a doubt that was being directly addressed by this verse, a question in people's mind. Can any one of you remember what that was? And if you don't, then what I would suggest is that you revise the notes and kind of get the major points every week. You remember the doubt that triggered. I don't understand why don't we simply say that things that are seen in our lives, like, objects, people, situations, and so on, are what they are? Why do we have to analyze it? Because our lives consist of dealing with what we see as experiences, what is presented in front of us, and to a certain degree, whether we are capable of doing it or not, we deal with it. Some deal better, others don't deal quite as well, but we are all, and we have a common methodology. Everybody says, this is a good thing, we should go towards it, this is something to be avoided. And so we have a common understanding which seems to work. So take things for what they are, or the face value. What are you doing why are you bringing Ishvara into the picture as to why that this is created by Ishvara and this is not the way it looks, it's not the way it is, and so on? What is the reason for it? So this was one of the questions. Okay, this was the doubt. So the things exist as they see it. There's a table. It shows me that it's a table. What's the big thing about analyzing it? So this is one type of question which was brought out in the Manasa Ullasa. So there are two main books that comment on Dakshinamurti Stotram, and one of them is the Manasa Ullasa, which we are primarily taking up. The other one is called Tattva Sudha, which is a smaller book and very respected also. And in the interest of simplicity, I am not taking both of them, but once in a while I'll move over and study some of the points that are brought up in that book as well, which I did in this particular case. So in the Tattva Sudha, there is another set of doubts. It's not as though Tattva Sudha is the first one to point that out, but it makes a point to bring up a certain doubt which is prevalent elsewhere in the Shastra at this point. That's all. So I think, because these are very common questions and so on. So that question is this. So now we have, please remember this for as you analyze it, these are important things to see, that there are two basic doubts that are triggering why this particular Nana Chidra number 4 is meant for. What kind of doubt? Because this is the normal thing that none of us are smart enough, unless we are spiritually very advanced, which very few people are. We are. It's in the history of humankind that one is that the very famous case of Ramana Maharshi, of course, is there, but there are so many of them. Ramana Maharshi is not the only one. We just take his example because he was relatively recent and so on, but there are so many of them where you have a 6 or 7 year old girl or a boy, starts asking questions. It all comes from the previous birth. It all comes from the previous birth. It's really like people who were studying like students like us and didn't finish the job. And so then the body gave away. And so Ishvara protects it. And somehow if you have a normal child, then that child starts playing with dolls and cars and so on and so forth. It's just, normal. There are other children who will say, what's going on? Who are we? Where are we going? They start asking more fundamental questions. So these questions are there for others. So this is a more advanced type of a question that I don't understand why we have to analyze that things are not what they seem to be. Because we are doing fine, thank you, with taking things to be what they are and dealing with the effects of it, as I mentioned. And so that is a normal life. And then we become more educated and then so on and so forth, and we improve our ability to deal with the world. And so in addition to artha and kama, dharma comes into the picture, all those kinds of things. This is one set of questions. The second set of questions, which Tattva Sudha has pointed out, is a more advanced question which says, wait a second. You're telling me that Atma is isn't it? So we say, yep, that's what we're saying. He says, then I have a question. If that is the reason, how can Atma have ignorance? How is that possible? Good question, really. Good question. It's like once Swami Dayananji gave us a funny example. So he says there was a wedding. There was a wedding in a village in India, and in those days there was no electricity. So when the day of the night of the wedding, usually sometimes the weddings are in the evening and night time when light is required. So the usual thing was this thing called Petromax. So the Petromax is a very powerful light, I guess some kind of a gas-oriented light, and it is done in a very elaborate setup with metal and so on. It's heavy, and so it is put down and it emanates a lot of light. So on the wedding day, in night time, they have many of these put at various places so that the place is lighted for lots of people to come and so on. So the father of the groom or bride or someone, he told one of his job, your job is put this Petromax on your head and walk around and find out when there is darkness, put it there. Is that clear? So he says, yeah, I'll do it. So after half an hour, this fellow comes back and he says, I can't find any place there was darkness. Wherever I was there was only light, and I could not find any darkness. So he says, I couldn't put it in. So this person said, oh my goodness, who did I hire to do this? This is so stupid. His knowledge, his awareness, his consciousness, then how can you have ignorance in the Atma? You cannot have it. So it is always, that means that the Atma is not all light, as you say. So your premise of Atma being independent is incorrect. How do you answer that? And then he sits down. Then another guy stands up. He says, by the way, I have another doubt. You're telling, he's talking about Vedantin, you're telling me that the Atma is covered by some kind of an ignorance. Aren't you telling this? So he says, yes, that's true. And it really is true. It is true that, and I must say that very early on in introducing myself to Vedanta, these questions came to me too. How is this possible? I don't understand this. Because we don't really know our Atma. This is very clear. And the Vedanta Shastra also says it, that you are ignorant about yourself. You're somewhat knowledgeable about other things, but you're completely ignorant about yourself. You are saying it. So he says, yeah, I am saying it. He says, you're also saying that the Atma is nirakaraha. It doesn't really do anything. And moving things. Aren't you saying that? So he says, yes, that's right. It just quietly sits there. So he says, now my question is, if it quietly sits there, and if it is completely covered by ignorance, how is his ignorance going to go? So these two questions on one side, and the other side, the question that why are you over-analyzing things, just take things for what they are the triggers for this verse number 4. Nana chitragato darastita. So this, in reviewing this verse, equips us to understand the very basic premises, the very, very, very basic premise of Vedanta. So I think I mentioned that to all of you before, that unless we become experts, it's like any other field where if you go to a doctor and you say, doctor, I've got a problem, And so he says, what are your symptoms? And you tell, and the doctor says, no, I think I know. I think I know what it is. So that means that no matter what the questions are in the field of the medicine that this person specializes in, he knows, he's an expert. He can tell what is this, that, or the other. I don't know if I told you this or not, but I think I might have, and I hope I'm not repeating it. I woke up one morning about 4 months ago, I guess it was, with a very severe pain in my foot. Did I tell you this? No, maybe, I don't know. Anyway, so I don't know what was, I've been walking quite a bit and so on, and so I didn't know what was going on. I tried to sort of walk it off. I took some aspirin, which helped a little bit, Tylenol, but then it didn't go away. It was a very potent symptom, by the way. So after about 3-4 days, I gave up. I said, I better go to a doctor. So I went to Palo Alto Medical Clinic and asked for a sports medicine doctor, because I was very convinced that I have some kind of a pulled muscle or something like that. It was on the side of the foot, outside the foot, on the side. I still remember this young Indian doctor coming in. He was about 47, 48. And he just asked for the entire symptoms. He asked me what medicines I am taking for my other ailments. And he said, I think you have gout.
No, you are told this.
So I said, gout? I had heard for some very overweight people who drink and eat a lot getting gout, but I'm not overweight and I don't eat or drink that much. So he says, well, I think the two main symptoms you have are the severe pain in the middle of the night, and the other one is that one of the medicines you are taking, which is called HCTZ, is a diuretic. He says, those two made me think this is gout. I didn't believe him. I said, no, it must be something else, this, that, or the other. It turned out to be gout, because he gave me a medicine, and he says the confirmation that it is gout is that this medicine, which will cure it within 72 hours, it will be completely gone. And if it doesn't go away, that means it was not gout. It went away. No, it's gout. So, with what the diagnosis is and what the medicine is and so on. Otherwise, it is going to a pharmacist. The pharmacist knows a little bit, but not exactly. In Vedanta, it doesn't help to be a pharmacist only. It would not solve your problem. Because this foot pain is just one problem. The problem of not being completely happy in our life is a much more serious problem. And it requires a thorough study of all aspects of it. Otherwise, what will happen is it will give you some solace. You'll be a little happier. And this I think we're going to do more of. This is the difference between Shravanam and Mananam and Nididhyasanam. And not being able to do Nididhyasanam means that you have some ideas, but it doesn't completely help you. It helps you a little bit here and there. In order for you to be to help you completely, you have to become an expert. And so it is important that we really get to know very clearly what is happening. What are the reasons and so on. So this verse, number 4, is to address these two types of doubts in our mind. This is an important way of looking at it and so on. So there we saw that that these questions are reasonable. They are reasonable, no question about that. You cannot dismiss it. You don't say, no, you don't understand or anything. No, this, at certain level. In fact, this is where a clear understanding of the different types of realities is very important. This is one of the kind of like, just like in medicine, you have some very fundamental things that you need to know about biology and all so on and so forth. Similarly here, it is extremely important that we become experts. Not that, oh, I think this is this. It should immediately tell you in your life what kind of reality you are thinking of. And by this time you should be very conversant with an understanding of the types of reality that we have to deal with. There are different types of realities. This is something we have to be very clear about. And just as a revision of that, the realities that we should be very clear about are the three, as you know, which are and by realities you can even say truth. It's very funny that you can say there are three kinds of truths. Hey, how can there be three kinds of truth? Either the thing is true or it is not true. Well, this is a very fundamental part. There really are three types of truth. And so, the three types of reality, which can be called as Sat, as you know, are subjective reality, which is called Pratibhasika. Pratibhasika, Sat. Then we have an objective reality, which is called Vyavaharika. Sorry. Sat. And the third kind, which is called absolute reality. And this is called Paramarthika. Sat. So those are the three kinds that we should be very familiar with. They should just roll off our tongues and our minds very with facility. And so what that means is the subjective reality has some reality, but only a person can see. And it is not shared with anyone. And oftentimes it is, and therefore it is not real, not very real. And so examples of these are that you may have certain ideas about yourself or about someone else that are your own personal ideas. That I am not very I'm not very smart. I'm a dull person, or some other person is not very smart. So this is something that you could have, and it is not as though you are lying. So it has some reality to you, but it is not shared by anyone. It depends purely on the subjectivity of the person. And so this is kind of like daydreaming or being depressed about things. Depression is a very important thing about pratibhasika sat. And it's really how prevalent depression has become, where people have to take medicines and so on. They don't see any sense in living well. They are always, they don't have a smile on their face. They see problems everywhere. They say this is like the next stage from suicide, depression. And everybody says, hey, what's happening? Your life is okay. He says, no, it's not. No, not to me. This is a typical case of the first type, which is pratibhasika sat. And so you have to treat it well, because the doctors have to say, it's not as a saying, you must be kidding. Why are you depressed? There's no depression. He says, I am depressed. What are you talking about? So the doctor has to say, I know you're depressed, and I think it is, a lot of the psychiatry is based on that, really speaking, is on subjectivity. Then the more common one is an objective reality. And before I give that example, another one, I think I've given it to you before, is that if I bring an apple here and put it on the table, and we ask you, what do you think this is? It's very possible that it may look like a pear. So someone will raise their hand and say, I think it's a pear, a greenish looking apple that looks like a pear. So that is clearly wrong, but that is your own personal opinion. Other people will say this is an apple. So the identifying it's an apple is vyavaharika sat. That means that from a transactional standpoint, you all agree, right? It's an apple, they say, yep, apple. Okay. To a scientist, the word apple is just a name. And it is not specific enough. And a scientist would put down an equation, CO2H5, this, that, or the other, the DNA of it, and that is, from a relative standpoint, is the paramarthika sat. Paramarthika sat. That means that you've broken down to its absolute constituents in some equation. The look is also, the life of the apple also, all those kinds of things are in a scientific equation. So this is what we call a paramarthika sat. Anyway, going back to our old example, so the objective reality, vyavaharika sat, means the pratibhasika sat was that I am depressed. The vyavaharika sat is that I am a human being. Now the fact that you are depressed may not be visible to people. They may not agree with it, except to you. That's a very subjective thing. But the fact that you're a human being, there is no dispute. You are all human beings. So this is what would be called a vyavaharika sat. And for most of us, this is where we stop. You see, so this is exactly like, for most of us, we stop at the level of an apple. Hey, do we have enough apple? We always go through this. And then if not, then we have to buy bananas and apples. And that's all we eat. How much does it cost? What kind of an apple? All that's it. But to a scientist, that is just the beginning. And in fact, they probably are doing a lot of research on saying, why do mangoes, have an aroma like a mango? What is a mango aroma versus an apple aroma? I'm sure that still has not been determined yet. It is still being worked on, and this work will be going on, and somebody will say, yes, the following molecular structure means it's a mango molecular structure. That's what it is. And you can change it. You can fool around with the DNA and all that. So that would be a greater truth than simply an apple. So most people just stay at the level of the Vyavaharika Sat. So now we can say that the two sets of questions, having introduced these three different kinds of sats, we can now say your question is at the Vyavaharika Sat level. The kind of questions you are asking are at the Vyavaharika Sat level. In fact, there is another level beyond that, which is Paramarthika Sat. So your question stops at the Vyavaharika. It's kind of like saying, this is an apple, don't bother me anymore. I'm not interested in scientific molecular structure and stuff like this. This is enough. All I need is, I'm hungry. And so, and similarly, this question is that, just take things for what they are. Why are you bothering with it? What's the big problem? So there, the answer to that is, there is in fact another level of reality. And the reason, you see, there's a difference. The reason we don't recommend that you analyze an apple's molecular structure, because you don't gain anything. So what? So what? Big deal. You get some wisdom out of it. You can ask people that, it is such a funny thing, I remember. There was in our family when I must have been no more than about 14, 15 at that time. So this was at a time when there was a great value for going abroad. And anybody, if you had been in England, nobody ever came to USA. That was unheard of. But if you went to England, you were considered, oh my God. So there's a fellow, distant person in our family in Punjab, who was really not, he had some screwed up mind. He was really, people knew that he's a kind of a foolish person. But somehow or the other, his family sent him to London. And I remember, we were in some kind of a social event, and he kept asking us, do you know what they call curd in England? So we said no. And you know what if he had stopped that, he would be okay. He was serious. He says, do you know what it is? You don't know? How about you? We're all sitting there. Then he gave the answer after about 10 minutes. Yogurt. Don't you know it's called yogurt? No. Who the heck cares at that time whether it's called curd or not? There's something wrong with it. It's a loose screw. And he was all just trying to show off that I'm from England, now I know something. So looking at the molecular structure of apple is kind of like saying yogurt. It's not just curd. It's not just apple. This is CO2, right, this, that, or the other. This is what it is. Do you know that? But this is not the situation with analyzing your life, because the difference between Vyavaharika Sat and Paramarthika Sat means the difference between slavery and freedom. Huge difference. If you don't have Paramarthika, an insight into the Paramarthika Sat, you are going to be in the cycle of birth and death over and over again. You're not going to get off of it. Your life will be that of a samsara. It is not an ordinary thing. This is the keys to immortality. Huge difference. It's not just kakadanta. This is the example given in Shastra. Not kakadanta. How many teeth does the crow has? It's just like, what do they say in England? Is it curd or is it yogurt? It's not like that. This is much more important. And that's the reason for this verse. That's the reason for this verse. So there it is said. Then again, I think I go back to the fact that we have to really become experts in Vedanta. That what we have to see is that there is a thing called Paramarthika Sat and a Vyavaharika Sat, which is reflected Paramarthika Sat. And a reflected Paramarthika Sat means an understanding that a reflection has a lower reality than the original. This is key. This is where we have to really think about it. We have to be given some basic instruction, shravanam. We have to think about it and then act on it. Nididhyasana. So what it means is that there is a possibility that something looks like you, but it is not you. So a reflection has some very interesting aspects of you. So here, in answer to the first question, first set of questions, which was, why can't we take things to be what they are? There's certain reality to it, and we all agree on it, by the way. So that makes it, what does it make it? Vyavaharika Sat. But it is not Paramarthika Sat. Why is it not Paramarthika Sat? This we have to understand. So I think analyzing a reflection. So actually this way of thinking and so on and so forth is not exactly the same this is not the central theme of verse number 4, Nana Chidra Gadodarastita. Because as we saw, that metaphor is meant to convey this thought that you have a single light which appears in different ways. That's the metaphor. And we will come back to it in a minute. But in the meantime, I want to enhance it with the examples of the reflection. Okay, so the example is slightly different than the metaphor, but relevant, still relevant, and I think we'll throw some insight into it. So let's shift our attention to a person looking at a reflection. Okay, so let's just do that for a minute. Okay, that being the case, here's what happens to the reflection. So let's say here that we are looking at a reflection in a body of water. It could be done in a mirror also, but let's say we are looking at ourselves in a body of water. And the reason for the water is that the water is more amenable for moving and so on. The mirror doesn't move, although it can be dirty and it can be moved also. But let's just look at the example of a person looking at the reflection in the mirror. Okay. So now what happens is, the reflection is and the reflection is very close to the original. If you're looking at it with one set of clothes, then the reflection also has the same set of clothes. If all of those kinds of things. So the reflection is. Now the isness of, you cannot say that the reflection is not, because if there are other people looking at the same reflection, they also see the same reflection as you do. So it's in that sense, it's like a vyavaharika sat. But the reflection is not, the reflection is, but the isness of the reflection is at a lower level than your isness. And in fact, I think one of the things that we should try to see is to, oftentimes I find one of the problems in studying any subject is that you like certain words and those words become so fixed, they become trite. They lose the meaning. One of them is like mithya. The word mithya is that, this is, what does it really mean? That has to be very clear to us. And the more I've been reading and studying and so on and so forth, I really like the word lower reality. Mithya means it has a lower reality. A dream has a lower reality than a waking. Lower level. It has very quickly, it still frightens you and so on and so forth, but it just goes over. It doesn't leave any marks on you, and so on. It is not the same thing. It can be dismissed much more easily. And so similarly, ornaments of a gold have a lower reality than the gold. So the word mithya should be well understood. What does it really mean? And I suggest our mind is to look at it as a lower reality. If vyavaharika sat has lower reality than paramarthika sat, a reflection has a lower reality. Doesn't mean there is no reality. And in fact, if you study Buddhism, almost all strands of Buddhism, Buddhism also now have, is one of the issues of Buddhism and many other religious thought is that the original thinking has gotten so diverse. There's so many strands of it, you don't know what the original was. We have no idea what Buddha said a few things that we know. One of the things he said is that everything is sorrowful. We don't agree with that. The whole world doesn't exist and it gives you sorrow. How can it does not exist and give you sorrow? Only a mithya thing can give you sorrow. In fact, you have to create the sorrow for yourself. Anyway, we have a lot of arguments and we dismiss Buddhism as non-thinking, really. But anyway, one of the things they say is that the world has no reality. We say, no. It has a lower level of reality. You cannot say it has no reality. It's like saying, I have no reflection. You are seeing the reflection right in front of you, aren't you? It's properly put it under the stage that has a lower form of reality. So what does the lower form really mean? Lower reality means that it looks like the real, but it is now in a different realm altogether. It is in a different level of reality So, for example, if there are ripples in the water, then your reflection is going to have ripples in the reflection. It'll be like floating like this. Or if the mirror is concave or convex, then you'll become fat or very long. All those things will happen. So what that means is that the reflection is at the same level as other things that seem to affect it. So here Swami Maheshananji made a very brilliant point. I tell you, I really respected his view on this. He said, look at it the following way. He says, so in fact, let's just, I realize I've gone away from the Nana Chidra, but I think it'll end up helping you with the understanding of that as well. In fact, this analogy of having a reflection in the mirror is a very interesting one. And I think, this is what Swami Viditatmananda just yesterday, or day before yesterday, on Saturdays, was talking about the same thing. He says, one of the things that happens is that even simple examples can give you different levels of understanding. And he was talking about the 10th man example. He says, I see students coming to me and saying, Swamiji, that 10th man example has given things more clarity to me now than it did before, as though it's changed somehow. What has changed is your own thinking. Your own thinking has really changed in that manner. And so you see things more clearly. Okay? If I can make a digression, I'll come back. Remind me if I forget, but I have this figure in front of me, so I'll come back to it. So, if you look at the makeup of temples in India, it's a very interesting, there is a Shilpa. There's a Shilpa Shastra, which means the Shastra of making temples. So what happens is that the temples in India, in Vedanta, in the Hinduism, in the Vedic Shilpa, are made in the form of a human body. So you have an outer layer which is Annamaya Kosha, where people can be moving around, throwing banana peels and so on and so forth. It gets dirty, like our also body can get dirty. And slowly you go to less trafficked areas, which means an inner part of the human body. So from Annamaya Kosha, you go to Pranamaya Kosha. Then you go to Manomaya Kosha. Then you go to Vijnanamaya Kosha. Then you go to Anandamaya Kosha. And finally, you go to the inner sanctum sanctorum. And another thing, this is where I was talking about, this is what triggered my thinking, is that the example, that the 10th man example, has given me more insight. Somebody was telling Swamiji, he brought this out in his talk the day before yesterday. And it's absolutely true, that happens to many of us. What happens is that the travel from the outer layers of the temple to the inner layers of the temple, finally you go to an inner sanctum which is completely dark. And in fact, in the purest form of temple architecture, the Vigraha has to be black stone. It cannot be white. It could be completely black stone. And the light there also has to be very dim. In fact, it's almost not there. And this is the point I was making. what happens is that you are supposed to gradually go from light to darkness so that your eyes become more sensitive to darkness. And my wife and I were staying at the ashram a couple of days ago, and of course we had no idea where the bathroom was, and so I closed the light and so on and so forth, and left a little bit so I could see in the nighttime if I have to get up. It was completely dark, but after having closed my eyes for a while and so on, I opened it. Now it was much dark, much brighter. I can easily tell where it is. That happens to all of us. So then what happens is that in a temple, you're supposed to go into the inner sanctum, with your eyes that are now half closed and more subtle with respect to understanding the darkness. And of course the final part of it is that the priest, who is signifying a teacher, now makes the light, na tatra suryo bhati na chandra tarakam, which will come. I'll do this. I just happen to remember that verse. And then this is the main thing that the priest should be doing in all of our aratis and so on. This is the main arati. Na tatra suryo bhati na chandra tarakam nema vidyuto kutoyam agnihi tameva bhanta manubhati sarvam tasya bhasa sarvamidam vibhati. So he is supposed to do this with the lamp. And so what happens there is that when you do that, the main black vigraha is barely visible. That means it is very subtle. So the drishti of the Atma also has to be equally subtle. And you have to slowly get there. You cannot suddenly get there. And in fact, much more visible in this sanctum are the jewels bedecking the main vigraha. Those are easily visible. So the Shakti of Paramatma is easily visible. Not completely visible, because more than half of that, more than 90% of that is invisible, but the ones that are visible are easily visible. And so the jewels around the vigraha are easily visible, but the vigraha itself remains very subtly imperceptible. Anyway, so that's a simple thing. That means that you have to understand this slowly. It cannot happen. We have to make our drishti more subtle. Why? Because the Atma is very subtle. Right now we are good for understanding how's my body and what's happening and so on and so forth. But to understand the Atma, the whole mind has to be more subtle. Anyway, going back to this, this is an important thing. We're going to spend some more time on this. So this is the explanation by Swami Maheshananji. Very nice, excellent. So he says, look at this. You are looking at the reflection in the mirror. Right? Okay. Now, your reflection, as I said before, is at a lower level than yourself. And it's a lower level which is the same level as the mirror, same level as the body of water. How do we say that? Because the mirror or the body of water and the reflection have a relationship, sambandha. They have a sambandha. How do they have a sambandha? Because if the mirror is dirty, then your reflection is dirty. If the water is moving, then your reflection is also moving. But they have no sambandha to you. you're not moving. You are at a much higher level. But a very interesting thing is that your reflection gets blended in with the other things in the lower reality. I will bring this, remember this point, and I will bring it up when we talk about the Nana Chidra Gadodhara Sthita Prabhabhaswaram. So we will come to that. Anyway, this is a very important point, that the reflection is at a lower level where it is at the same level as the rest of the things that are not really reflecting, they are not reflecting you. You see, the mirror, the frame of the mirror is not reflecting you. In fact, the part of the of all this part here, other than your own individual reflection, is not reflecting you. It is there on the same level as your reflection. The two are actually mixed up. Okay? So this is one thing. And in fact, if we want to extend this a little bit more, if we want to just, before I was going to go into the Chit and the Ananda portion, but if you just want to stay here for a minute and just extend this, that means my body and mind, my jivatvam, is at the same level as the rest of the universe. It has a sambandha. It is affected by it. If it is 91 degrees, then my body becomes uncomfortable. If it is 45 degrees, my body gets cold. So, even though the outside, so you can see this, the outside temperature and the outside world is like these lines. You see that? They are like the lines. What I'm seeing are like, they are not my reflection. They're not my reflection, but they are at a lower level than me. And they are the same level as my body and mind. So my body and mind is my reflection. You see? My body and mind is my reflection. It is at a lower level than me. And I am not affected by what I see around me. I'm not affected by it. But I don't see that very well yet. But it's the truth. This is what's happening. I am taking my reflection to be myself. In fact, the wisdom consists in understanding that the reflection is your reflection. What does that mean? That means you are different from the reflection. And there is someone whose reflection it is. And that someone is at a higher level than the things that are being affected by it. This is a very important thing that we have to really follow through in our thinking. But now let me go on and complete this analysis. We're short of time, but there's one point I want to bring up which is very important. I want to make sure that we do this today itself. So this this picture is true for Sat. Sat means the principle of existence. Or the reality or the truth as we saw earlier. So what does that mean? That means that it is. It is there. Your reflection is. But the isness of the reflection is the reflection of the isness of you who is not reflected. There is an isness of the reflection. You cannot say there isn't. But it's not an independent existence. It is a highly dependent existence. Because I, the consciousness, is the swarupa of existence. And my body and mind reflects me. But until I understand the relative realities of them, I don't understand that that isness is really my isness. It's borrowed from me. Very much like as the ornament's luster is the gold's luster, not its own. So this analysis of the reflection and so on can be looked at from the standpoint of Sat. Equally applicable is the same thing with respect to the knowledge, the awareness. And the two are two sides of the same coin. You cannot say something is until you are aware that it is. Awareness and existence go together. And you can even say it kind of like a shining of the reflection, the knowledge of the reflection. The knowledge of the reflection is really your knowledge, but reflected from the reflection. Okay? Now comes a very interesting aspect of this, which Swami Maheshananji and Swami Paramarthanandaji both had explained very well, is the aspect of reflection in Ananda. Okay, so listen to this now carefully. Okay? So for this, I'm going to give you the picture of ice cream. Okay? So the picture of the ice cream is also in a frame, as I meant, I put that down there. Okay? So the ice cream is in a frame, and the frame consists of a shop that you can go to, and register payment and all of those kinds of things, toppings on the ice cream, and so on and so forth. And so there is a setup. And the setup includes a refrigerator kind of cooling mechanism, because a hot ice cream you don't want to have. If it is melted at room temperature, then, so all this is the factors in ananda, which is the third aspect of you. Sat and Chit and Ananda are the reality about you. And it is your Sat which is reflected in the reflection. It is your Chit which is reflected in the Chit and both are here. And it is your Ananda. How? Let us look at this. This is very important to see. Okay? What it means is that the ice cream is at the same level as the rest of the things in the frame. It is kept very cool. It is prepared with the kind of flavors that you like. Vanilla is the most popular, chocolate, etc. Coffee is my favorite. Coffee, this, that, or the other, all kinds of things. So that is all that is not reflecting any of you. So the setup, the shop where you can get it, etc., is kind of like the frame. But then there is the actual ice cream. And the touching of the ice cream to your tongue, licking it, is also part of the setup. Okay? So the ice cream and all the setup, buying it, putting, then finally taking a scoop of it and so on, is all part of the setup. Your ananda is reflected in the ice cream. And your ananda, which is reflected, is your ananda. Just like the reflection is you, the ananda also is you. There is no other source of ananda. Because you cannot, there is no such thing as an object that has ananda. It is the setup. That's why if you get a flavor which you don't like, you don't enjoy it. The ananda is not there. And if the ice cream is old, or I don't know, something like this, you don't have ananda. So really it is your own setup, your own combination of things. In other words, exactly like I would go back and really analyze the reflection. You could not see yourself unless you had the right setup. It has to be a mirror, it has to be a body of water, and you should see yourself very clearly. You cannot look at a wall and see yourself and say, oh, I look very nice today, good. No. You have to provide the right setup. Similarly, you cannot eat anything and be happy. Swami Paramarthananda in his talks on Ashtavakra Gita has repeatedly pointed out this fact so clearly. So let me just point that out. What happens is your family occasionally gives you ananda, generally gives you ananda, should give you ananda, doesn't have to. when the family gives you ananda, it is reflecting your own ananda, your own joy. If the family setup is not proper, your ananda is not reflected clearly in your mind. That doesn't mean that you are not ananda. Remember this fact. Just because you're looking at a wall and there is no reflection doesn't mean you are not there. See this point very clearly? It is convenient for us to look at a mirror while we are shaving. But that doesn't mean that you disappear if you don't have a mirror. So similarly, if the family doesn't give you ananda, if your friends don't give you ananda, if the world doesn't give you ananda, that doesn't mean that you have disappeared as a very source of ananda. But in our foolishness, it's really as foolish as looking at the wall and saying, I've disappeared. It's exactly like that. But we have such a preoccupation with ananda that we act very foolishly. Nobody would look at the wall and say, you know what, I have disappeared. If you look at a mirror, you say, I have not disappeared. I can see myself very clearly. But in the ananda's case, we just outsource our ananda to the world. And really speaking, the ice cream is just reflecting your own ananda. That means your tongue, your taste buds, and you should be awake also. That's another thing. You cannot be licking an ice cream while you are asleep. You won't have any ananda. So it has to be, so many factors have to take place. You have to be awake, you have to be healthy. And your mind has to be there. Supposing there is a bereavement in your family, unfortunately, will you enjoy ice cream? It's the same ice cream. All the factors have to be there. And these are your factors. These are your reflections. But besides that, you are there undisturbed and unenquired into, as though I don't even exist. It is very much like a dream where your own reality as a waker is disappeared. So these examples of the reflection should really be understood by heart. These are very important examples, as lots of ones are. And so now what we will do next week is to see how this seeming reflection becomes a reality in your life. Seeming reflection means the fact that you're getting upset with the family. Oftentimes people will say that my son doesn't like me, or my daughter doesn't like me, or my wife doesn't like me, or my family doesn't respect me anymore. And this is very interesting. We are always in a situation where you are liked if you're useful to them. And if you grow older and you're not more useful, they stop liking you. It becomes a burden. You should be very aware of that. And so you're outsourcing your ananda to the things and so on is just stupidity, Vedanta says. It is your own ananda, and it is very much like, am I seeing my reflection clearly? If I am, then my ananda is is reflected. If I am not seeing it clearly, it looks like I've disappeared. My Ananda has disappeared. In fact, any Ananda that you enjoy should be seen to be your own. And any any absence of Ananda that you don't like is also nothing but a reflection on the fact that your Ananda is still there. So this is the expertise in Vedanta that we have to do. Otherwise, we are like, neighborhood. We are not a doctor anymore. We are just some kind of an ointment maker. If you want to be a doctor to understand what the disease of life is all about, we have to really become experts in this. And so the Dakshinamurti Stotram and all the commentaries on it and so on is meant to make us experts in analyzing exactly what is happening in my life. We are making a great mistake. We just don't understand the beautiful play of Ishvara, the Leela of Ishvara, as Swami Paramarthananda says, the entertainment of Ishvara. We don't enjoy the script. The script is an enjoyment, and it's only enjoying if you are different than you are just watching the play. Right now, you are participating without understanding what is happening. So all of these analyses make us experts in Vedanta that we will study. So with that, I'll close today's class, and we'll see next week. Om Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityor Ma Amritam Gamaya Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om. Yes, Zarina?
I have two questions. So number one is in this ice cream example,
Mhm.
we outsource our Ananda
Yeah.
to ice cream, right? But in reality, even though the joy that we derive from the ice cream is none other than our joy
Mm-hmm.
itself, the ice cream itself is at a lower level of reality.
Our reflection also, our enjoyment is also at a lower level.
But the Ananda that I'm
So
experiencing,
the Ananda that I am enjoying as a result of the ice cream is at a same
At the
level
same
as the
level
ice
as
cream
the ice
level.
So then similarly, when we were talking about dream and waking,
Yeah.
they are both, the dream, you said that the dream is at a lower level of reality
Right.
than the waking. But they are really both at a lower level of reality.
Yeah, that's true, but that was just an example.
Just in that example.
In that
right?
example, yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
You say life is a dream.
Right. So eventually, this my experiences also would be seen to be at a lower level than myself.
Right.
I don't understand yet at the higher level what that does mean. So this is what not yet clear, but once it does, then my experiences, instead of being becoming life and death, become entertainment, as Swami Paramarthananda has pointed out, which we will go over this in more detail. Yeah, so it becomes like a dream.
So I will go back to the very first statement you made.
Yeah.
All these observations and analysis only comes when you are at least some level of spiritual advancement.
That it only comes when you are
At a certain level of spiritual being a
growth,
spiritual
and
seeker.
yes, true. Yeah,
Because
so the
most people are not going to go through life saying,
no,
not going to ask these questions.
no. The question is that Jyoti is asking that I said that before, that most people will ask these kinds of questions only when they are somewhat spiritually more progressed, and that is true. But it doesn't mean that you have to do it yourself. You could, like it has happened to most of us. It's not as though I was like Raman Maharshi asking these questions. I just happened to run into some Swamis, and this is what Vedanta says, he says, have you asked these questions yourself? So I says, what questions? I'm not sure I should even be asking. They said, yes, you should be asking. And the more I thought about it, then I grew into those questions. Forget about answers. At least I grew into those questions. So it's not as though we are kind of, waiting for people to, but it just our fortune is just even to be introduced to it in some fashion or the other. Yeah.
Because in families you find that some people may be asking these questions and not
Very much
receiving.
so. Oh, absolutely, yes. I wish my kids would also ask these questions, but they don't. So
That's
God bless them.
It's reason.
Yeah, let them be happy with what they're doing. They'll find something. I think in my will I will write down, please study Vedanta sometime in your life.
That's a good idea.
Otherwise, I'll give it to the students.
Good point. Make it into a condition.
They will study.
That would be fruitless. Every time they'll study, he'll say, darn it, why do I have to do this? Yeah. Yeah.
If in a normal life, if you get upset with the family or something, what do you take that as? Do you take it still as that the whole episode or everything has gone at a lower level, and you as
So this is all prarabdha, all karma phala from the previous life, and that too will pass. Don't take it too seriously.
This will also.
It's
so
all will
how
pass.
so? Instead of getting sucked into it or getting too much serious, some sort of, you would have to stand
Apart from it,
just
yes,
to-
very much so.
Yeah.
And it's all a matter of your own setup and so on. Swami Dayananda used to say, let's say a boy, not a girl, you had a son who was wearing a boot, and at a 3-year-old, he kicked you. You're probably going to be very happy. Wow, this guy has become so strong. But supposing he's 22 years old, and he gives you the same kick, now you're ready to kill him. So it is all a matter of exactly what the prarabdha is. Many times we get extremely upset at our family, but we don't realize that this has been brewing up for a long time. We have not brought them up the right way. And just because we had sort of put it under the rug, but now it has come back to bite us. And we should just silently cry and ask for forgiveness from Ishvara that I didn't do my job very well. And even if I did, I was given a situation that I cannot handle. And I don't want to make it any worse. So let me just live with it the way I can. And I need your help. And probably the best thing would be to make a sincere attempt to have a new relationship with the same person. That might take a long time. They may not believe that you have changed, but eventually that might happen. And so this is what is called viparita bhavana. So when there is some friction in the family, then deliberately bring love into it. And at first the love would be fake, but slowly it will turn into a reality. So those are the kind of things that we should
So I have a personal philosophy on anything. When I go back and tell myself, I've written my own story, so I've got to live it. It's my own story, my own karmas, that's why, I'm here what I am.
Yeah, we are all, we are at our present case, depending on, not only this life, frankly, it's not just this life, because the way we are thinking and the way we are behaving in this life is a result of the previous life's thinking and the previous behavior.
That's when we wrote the story for the next life, that's what we're doing now for our next life.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's there's no discontinuities, there's no accidents in Ishvara's creation. It is all, we look like it's an accident, but there isn't. It's a series of points. Yes?
The lower level is the prayas and the higher level is shreyas, but this one, Anand here, should be even further than what we consider prayas and shreyas in general terms.
Yes, so prayas and shreyas are still at the vyavaharika level.
Yeah.
Correct. They are both in the vyavaharika level because although in the case of shreyas, you are likely to reach the paramarthic level faster because you are using your actions as an investment rather than enjoyment. That's the difference between karma yoga and simple karma. In simple karma, you say, I don't care about the future. This is the way I feel like acting today. It's like saying, I was reading somewhere, the average saving by an American person is not even enough for living for 3 or 4 years after retirement. This is the richest country in the world that does not believe in saving. They just want to enjoy.
Because they had systems in place like Social Security, that's how it started.
That's part of it is Social Security, but whatever it is.
You didn't have to worry.
So that's the difference between prayas and shreyas. Prayas means to enjoy now, and shreyas means to invest rather than to spend. But both of them are at the vyavaharika level. At the paramarthika level, there is something more to be done than shreyas. Shreyas would lead to an inquiry. Really what needs to be done to reach the next level is self-inquiry. And that unless that is done, you're not going to get out of it. You'll still be in the rut.
That is the transition point between Dvaita and Advaita.
Yes, that will be its transition point between Dvaita and Advaita, because to understand that there is no such thing as Advaita, it is all Advaita alone. It appears as Dvaita, but in reality it is Advaita. Yeah.
So Viparita Bhavana and Pratipaksha Bhavana the same thing?
Yes, Pratipaksha means, that's a good question. I'm not sure that I'm very
I think it's
clear about that. Pratipaksha, yeah, I think it will be the same.
The same.
Yeah. But
Why
But
don't you
Viparita
use-
Bhavana would mean a deliberate attempt, at least in the Viparita Bhavana. I'll have to see what the definition of Pratipaksha would be. But in Viparita Bhavana, it means that if you have a reaction toward criticizing someone,
The opposite.
then you deliberately bring out and praise the other person in your own mind. In your own mind. Don't even tell anyone. You doesn't have to say anything. First you'll say, wow, what a stupid person that is. But then you bring it and say, what, that person really has some qualities. And that neutralizes the poison in your own mind. Yeah.
That's the Pratipaksha Bhavana, right?
Okay, so I guess
He's a
it's probably-
devil's advocate.
Sorry?
Devil's advocate, Pratipaksha Bhavana is like opposing you.
Yeah, but what we're talking about is a positive outcome.
Force, huh?
Yeah, it's not no, I wouldn't go into the devil's advocate. No. No, this means that you have a tendency to be unhappy by judging something in a negative way, and really any judgment can be reversed if you, because many times we fail to see all the qualities, a deliberate attempt, so which is not a devil's advocate, this is a good advocate. So this is what we're talking about.
No, I remember Swamiji giving that example that you don't like somebody, but your intent every morning you are supposed to both, each of you, go and give each other a rose.
Yes.
So at first you will just do this and, you know.
Yeah, he brought up the same
Yeah.
recently
But
also.
then as time goes on, you know,
Correct.
slowly you'll crack a smile. You know,
Yes.
here we are at it again, you know.
Yes.
And then before you know it, then sometime you might even
Yeah.
embrace each other. So that.
Yeah, so I think this is also part of it, and then I think it just means that in the way we lead our lives, we don't keep it balanced. We don't, like for example, your spouse, we rarely say we love you. We are always looking at some small things that we are criticizing. You didn't do this, you forgot to do this, and so on. But if they do something good, we say, oh, that was expected, you know. But I think to really bring that out in your mind, so this would be a great way for you to do that. So, yeah.
Do you have a time?
9:09.
No, I know. Maybe a last question.
Oh.
So,
Oh, I think do you have time? Yes, yes.
yeah,
I have the
asking
time.
the question.
I'm sorry. I took it literally. Yes.
So, in terms of Anand, when we are eating the ice cream,
Correct.
we get encroached into that, and somehow this is, I don't know, Vedic, yogic or whatever Vedantic, but then your undercurrent becomes so calm, and your characteristic of Ananda is reflected into the ice cream, whereas it's your own characteristic as
Yeah.
Anand. Now, where is the lower level and higher level?
Okay,
stance
so
in that?
so what it means is that when you have your mind becomes calm and you are having an enjoyment, that is still, this is what is called Anandamaya Kosha. It is not Ananda, it is a reflection. How is it a reflection? Because you know that this Ananda is not going to last.
That's true.
Okay? Not going to last. In fact, right after the ice cream, you'll say, oh my God, this is 200 extra calories. Immediately, your mind becomes critical of yourself.
Or second gone, third
That's
gone,
right.
gone.
So that Ananda is at a lower level. That is not true. That is a reflection of your Ananda which never goes away. But you don't know that. So that being ignorant to that, you're only focused on the enjoyment of the eating of the ice cream. That is at a lower level. That is a reflected Ananda. This is what's called Anandamaya Kosha in Taittiriya Upanishad, not Ananda.
So in that case, the real description comes from Vedanta understanding.
Initially,
Yeah.
but then you will yourself say, you will see that the sense of peace is your own nature. Your Satchidananda is your own nature. You will yourself see it. Initially, it is simply pointed out, but it isn't until you become, adept at seeing, my goodness, this is what it is. And that takes a little while.
And we have some example about dog chewing the bone.
Correct.
And he doesn't understand. But
That's your own blood, exactly. Something like that. There's a question.
Swami Paramathananda used the original consciousness and reflected consciousness, OC.
OC and
So
R.
Yes.
I think
Yeah,
that
reflected
that
consciousness.
probably helps understand
Yes,
the reflected Ananda.
yeah.
We
Okay.
should all bring some ice cream for the practical class. Whose Ananda is the most?
That's a temporary,
Yeah.
No, you should also bring some bitter things also. There also you should have Ananda while you are